Senator McKim.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I want to start by asking some questions about the Good Friday shooting on Manus Island, and particularly the false information released publicly about that by both the department and the minister.
Senator Chair.
I beg your pardon?
Senator Kim, I have taken the bait straight up front, but I think you know it is inappropriate. That is your statement that it was false information, and certainly I'm sure your line of questioning will not reflect that to the Secretary.
Well, I'll just take that as a comment, Minister. So I wanted to ask, firstly, Mr Pizzullo, did the department provide a response to Fairfax on April 14th that said this: there are reports PNG military personnel discharged a weapon into the air during the incident. No one was injured. Did the department provide that to Fairfax on the 14th of April?
I'll have to check the records, but if that's in quotes and attributed to a departmental spokesperson,
yes, it is.
I make the assumption that that was a comment
All right, well,
to that.
All right, well, on that basis...
Sorry, I hadn't quite finished. That I assume that was a spokesperson authorised to make that comment based on the facts that they had to hand, yes.
Sorry, I missed the last couple of words.
Based on the facts that they had to hand at the time.
Yep. It's not accurate to say that a weapon was discharged into the air, is it, Mr Pizzullo?
Oh, well, this matter has been currently exhaustively inquired into by the PNG government through two means. One is the military discipline military discipline investigation that's under the jurisdiction of the PNGDF, the Papua New Guinea Defence Force, and there's also a criminal investigation underway through the auspices of the police. We really need to await the conclusions of those proceedings to be definitive, but I think based on what is now known, as opposed to what might have been known in the first hour or two of the incident, it appears as though, and I'd say that with a very strong caveat, dependent on the inquiries that are currently on foot and what they turn up, it appears that the number of weapons employed was greater than one.
Mm-hmm. And the shots were in fact fired into the centre as opposed to in the air? Again,
Subject to relying on PNG inquiries to establish that as a matter of fact, it appears as though, in light of the information that subsequently has become available as opposed to what might have been available in the first hour or two, that some shots, quite a number it seems, were fired laterally into the compound, yes. But again, I stress, that's based on the information that we have to hand.
Perhaps you could tell us where you're getting your information from. That might help.
Our own engagement with the PNG authorities.
All right, and thirdly, in regards to that very brief statement, the assertion that no one was injured, that's wrong, isn't it?
Even in light of information that's come to light since, I'm not aware of any.
You're not aware that Australian Wilson staff were injured in that attack, Mr Pizzullo?
I'm assisted here by Assistant Commissioner Woodford-Smith. He'll have, I suspect, better information than I have.
I hope so.
Senator, good morning. Kingsley Woodford-Smith, Assistant Commissioner Detention and Offshore Operations Command. So the advice that I have to hand at the moment is that there were 9 personnel injured. None of those were serious injuries, as I understand. 5 of those were service provider personnel. 1 was a PNG Defence Force officer. 1 was an Immigration Citizenship and Services Authority officer, and 2 were residents from within the MRPC.
All right, thank you. So, contrary to the assertion of the department on the 14th that no one was injured, there was actually 9 people injured. Is that accurate?
Again, I stress, based on the information that the media team would have had to hand, and based on the approvals that would have been put in place behind that statement, that would have been based on information best known at the time.
All right. So when was the record corrected?
I don't know what I don't know what we've said subsequently day by day, but we would always state at the time, and I stated again today, that that's a statement based on information that's available at the time.
Mr Woodford-Smith, are you able to assist? Was the record corrected, and if so, when?
So anything.
Senator, I can't tell you if the record was actually corrected around the number of injuries, but what I would like to say in confirming what the Secretary said is that a significant amount of information certainly has come out since the initial incident occurred. I think the other issue in terms of correcting the record, we need to be very cautious about how we might do that, given that there's 2 investigations currently on foot, and our normal process would be that we wouldn't start making comments like that until such time as potentially those investigations have been completed.
Yeah, well, it's a shame the Minister doesn't agree with you, but I'll come to that later. Mr Pizzolo, how many communications staff does the department have? Well, if I said between the department and the Minister you have over 80, would that be accurate?
Oh, I'm not sure. No, I can't see how you'd get to that number. I'd have to take that on notice. Communications also relates to internal comms, all staff messages and internal corporate communications. I'd exclude those for this purpose.
All right, thank you.
I think what you're going to is sort of media operations and media liaison.
Yep.
I'll take that on notice.
All right, thanks. You've got a page on your website correcting the record. I've had a look this morning. You haven't corrected the record at all about the completely inaccurate information that the department put out on Good Friday. Mr Pizzolo, the way this will work, Mr Pizzolo, is I will finish my questions to you and then I'll give you an opportunity to answer them. So my question, Mr...
Hang on. It is helpful if the question is, providing it's a question, not a statement or a political commentary, but a question, Senator.
Yep, thanks, Chair. The question, Mr Pizzolo, is, given you've got a page specifically or explicitly and specifically on your website that's designed to allow the department to correct the record, why has the department not corrected the 3 factual errors that it made within 2 sentences in the response that it gave to Fairfax, including claiming that no one was injured when we've discovered today that actually 9 people were injured?
Well, I think, Senator, the best way to answer that question in 2 parts is that since that time, the Minister and others, certainly me this morning, will indicate that many more shots were fired, point 1, that it was an unacceptable from our point of view, breakdown in the discipline of the relevant personnel who went to their accommodation, accessed those weapons and fired those rounds. We've made representations to that effect by the Governor of PNG and the Minister's expressed his strong views about the fact that this should be thoroughly investigated and people obviously properly held to account, as have the PNG authorities. In the circumstances, given the seriousness of the matter, the best course of action, and one that I thoroughly endorse, is to then await the conclusion of the 2 relevant inquiries. One is a military justice inquiry, the other one is a criminal justice inquiry in the civil jurisdiction. And then if we've got more to say at that point, we will say more at that point. Any suggestion that we've left in the public's imagination that early impression based on in good faith, presenting information best known at the time, has been superseded by what the Minister and others have said, the Minister in particular, that many shots were fired, it was dangerous and unacceptable and people need to be held to account. That's correcting the record.
Well, Mr Pizzolo, could you tell me when either the department or the Minister has indicated that 9 people were injured in this attack?
I'm not sure if we've
specific. Well, you haven't.
The numbers.
But you haven't. And neither has the Minister, Mr Pizzolo.
Well,
and yet the department on the 14th said no one was injured. I mean, it's rubbish. It's inaccurate. It's factually inaccurate, and it has not been corrected. It's rubbish.
The 14th of May. Today is the 22nd of May.
April. I think most people listening to this can understand.
I'm talking about the 14th of April, which was Good Friday, Minister, when over 100 shots were fired into the facility on Manus Island, when Australian citizens were injured, when the department said no one was injured, when in fact 9 people were injured.
To outline the information the department is, as at today, able to provide the committee, as opposed to a line of questioning which is just going back and forward, but I don't think actually providing any further clarity to the situation.
The question is abundantly specific.
A few others, I think, but so, Mr Pizzolo, could you just, as the Minister suggests, could you please just give the facts of the matter as you know them.
Chair, the question was actually why hasn't the record been corrected? That was the question.
Okay, well, I think Mr Pazzulo has answered
not.
that by saying he disagrees with you.
I strongly disagree that the Minister has said publicly, others in the diplomatic representations that I referred to earlier have made it very clear, not only are we knowledgeable that more shots were fired, they were fired in a highly dangerous and risky manner, and we expect people to be held to account. And the Minister has said that publicly.
Has the department advised the Minister that an alleged event involving a young local boy was a trigger for the Good Friday shootings?
The Minister's been advised on several occasions, including both before and after Good Friday, that the atmosphere in relation to the centre, its surrounding environment, which is a naval base, and in the larger surrounding environment, which is a township and other settlements, has been one characterised increasingly by tension, particularly in relation to concerns held by local residents in terms of the behaviour of certain persons associated with the centre. That includes concerns about the treatment of both women and children. And certainly in that context, we have provided advice to the Minister on incidents that are of that character.
Mr Pazzulo, do you have any kind of a memory problem?
Beg your pardon?
Do you have any kind of a memory problem?
Well, please just ignore that. That's not a question. If you,
I'll
if you have any,
the
proper
question.
questions, ask them.
I'll repeat.
Otherwise, I will
repeat the question, and I would ask Mr Pazzulo if he'd specifically respond to the question, not with a whole bunch of other words that have nothing to do with the question. The question, Mr Pazzulo, was and remains: has the department advised the Minister that an event with a young local boy was a trigger for the Good Friday shootings?
We provided, consistent with my earlier answer, and I might take directions from you, Mr Chairman, about whether my answers are relevant or not.
Well, I'd be cautious about you giving advice giving in public advice you've given to the Minister. As we all know, in estimates, that's not
indeed.
Well, the Minister's on the record as saying that was the advice he got from the department.
Well, look, perhaps could we resolve this by actually tabling the Minister's statement, do you think?
No, I already know what the Minister said. My question is, did the department advise him as such?
And we've provided advice to the Minister both in relation to the Good Friday matter and the incident referred to as...
And the nature of the advice is not something that's
right.
required.
The content tends not to be aired in public, but the fact that we've provided advice, Mr Chairman, I'm happy to say, both in relation to the incident involving the young boy, I'll just use that label, and the Good Friday incident, advice has been tendered, yes.
Again, that wasn't the question, Mr Pazzulo, so I'll just ask it again in case you can't recall it after having been asked it twice. Did the department advise the Minister that an event with a young local boy had anything to do or was it a trigger to the Good Friday shootings?
Well, I'm not sure that...
Well, I'm not asking you, Chair.
Well, I'm sorry, while I'm chairing this, you'll follow the rules of the estimates committees, which are
within
that the nature of advice to
question.
ministers is not something that is disclosed.
Well, that's a response, not a question, and I stand by my question. And
Well,
I
you
ask
can
Mr.
stand by
Pazzulo
your question as long as you
respond
like,
to it.
but I'm not allowing the Secretary to answer further.
And basically, there's lies on the public record, and they need to be addressed. That's the issue here, Chair.
Do you have any questions, Senator McKimball?
Yes.
Will I go to Senator?
Yes, I do, for the fourth time. For the fourth time. Did the department advise the Minister that an event with a young boy was a trigger for the Good Friday
That's been
shootings?
answered. If you have other questions, I'll go to...
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
You're wrong. It hasn't been answered. It's been dodged and avoided, and you've been complicit in it. So I'm putting it again. Did the department advise the Minister that an event with a young local
Senator
boy
McKim,
was a trigger for the Good Friday shootings? Yes or no?
You may be able to insult people in your own backyard, but you don't in this committee hearing. Now you're continually attacking
Chair.
a public servant
trying
who
to get
can't
to the truth.
respond in kind.
I'm asking
I
a question.
can and say that you've been shown to be untruthful in many of the things you say in the Senate. The Secretary can't say that because he is a public service, and I won't have you attacking and impugning the integrity a very senior, respected public service.
I'm
Now,
not-
if you have any other questions,
do.
ask them. Otherwise, I'll go to senators who do have questions.
Does the department have evidence that an event involving a young boy was a trigger for the Good Friday shootings?
That starts to canvass the content of advice, so just watchful of the chairman's guidance. We certainly have information to suggest that a number of factors contributed to the events on Good Friday, and we've advised the Minister accordingly.
The Papua New Guinea police have been abundantly clear, both publicly and directly to me during a personal meeting between me and Inspector David Yapu, who is the senior PNG constabulary officer on Manus Island, that an event involving a young boy had, quote, nothing at all to do with the Good Friday shootings.
Is there a question here?
Do you agree?
Sorry, Senator, with what?
With Inspector Yapu's public comments and his comments made directly to me in a personal briefing I had with him,
Your opinion, Mr Pizzillo, is not something that we asked for at this estimates, and I'm
not asking his opinion.
You are. You're asking if he agrees or disagrees or has another view.
Well, does the
That's entirely an opinion.
No, it's not.
And so I'll pass to Senator
You can run
Pratt.
interference all you like. But the truth will come out about this. The truth will come out about this.
You're not in the Tasmanian Parliament now, Senator Kim. Mr Pizzillo, however, I could say, and it's not for me to tell the Minister or yourself how to run the department, but very often it does seem that the immediate information that you are given by others is not accurate. And I often wonder why you bother to comment before you have absolutely accurate information. But that's a matter for you and your department, the Minister. But
there's always, if I may, Mr Chairman, there's a balance to be struck between the very high level of public interest that you have. I mean, literally, your media operations centre sometimes melts down by the volume of calls versus holding
the media don't run the country.
Indeed.
Yet.
Well, indeed, Mr Chairman, but equally where there's a basis, and this is no different from military operations or law enforcement operations, there's a balance to be struck between saying something and you caveat it, you put very careful caveats around it, as I have this morning, saying it's initial information, subsequently could be proven to be either not accurate or accurate only in part. And you have to strike that balance between what you say initially with caveats versus what you say later.
Well, Mr Pizzillo, I'm right out of my jurisdiction here, and if I were a proper chairman, I'd stop myself saying this. But I mean, it is different when you're relying on the advice of Australian officials and police officers. And not in any way do I impugn Papuan or Nauruan officials. But it does seem that, you know, some of the early advice given is not always accurate. And of course it's conflicted then by other activists on the island who want to get across a different political view. But anyhow, Senator Pratt.